Italy has spent 3,000 years accumulating things worth seeing: colosseums, cathedrals, palaces, and ruins that predate half the world's civilizations. It is a country that has turned tourism into a national art form and receives more than 57 million visitors every year. Underneath the open piazzas and the UNESCO World Heritage Sites and the trattorias with hand-painted menus, there are places you are simply not allowed to go. Some are sealed by the government, some by the military, some by the weight of history itself, and some by private owners who have absolutely no interest in your curiosity. These are the 17 forbidden places in Italy you will never be able to visit. Subscribe and let's get into it. Place 17. Decimo Manu Air Base, Sardinia. In the flat agricultural plain south of Cagliari, on the island of Sardinia, there is an air base that most Italians have never heard of, and that most Europeans have no idea exists on their continent. Decimo Manu Air Base, known to NATO planners as DC, is the largest and most advanced air combat training facility in Western Europe. Since 1957, it has been the place where fighter pilots from across the Alliance come to practice the kind of flying they hope they will never have to do for real. The base covers roughly 2,000 acres and is operated jointly by the Italian Air Force and NATO. At any given time, squadrons from Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, the United Kingdom, and the United States rotate through DC to use the restricted airspace above the Sardinian interior and the surrounding Mediterranean for live weapons training, electronic warfare exercises, and combat maneuver practice. The airspace over Decimo Manu is among the most heavily restricted in Europe. Civilian aircraft are rerouted around it. The sonic booms that occasionally rattle windows in nearby villages are not explained to local residents in any meaningful detail. The base is surrounded by a perimeter fence, guarded entrances, and the kind of security signage that makes the choice of whether to approach entirely simple. The aircraft that land and depart, some of them prototypes not yet publicly acknowledged, are not photographed by enthusiasts from the roadside. The base is positioned far enough from any public road to make that impossible anyway. The surrounding Sardinian countryside is genuinely beautiful. The air base in the middle of it very much is not open to you. Place 16. The restricted excavation zones of Pompeii. Naples, everyone knows you can visit Pompeii. More than 3.5 million people do it every year, making it one of the most visited archaeological sites on Earth. What most visitors do not realize as they walk the paved Roman streets is that they are seeing a fraction of the site. Approximately 1/3 of ancient Pompeii, perhaps 50 acres of buried Roman city, remains unexcavated and entirely off limits. The decision not to excavate everything at once is deliberate. Modern archaeology learned painfully through the 19th century experience of watching excavations destroy what they uncovered, that it is better to leave things buried until the science exists to properly preserve what you find. The sealed zones represent a library that no one has read yet. Beyond the unexcavated sections, large portions of what has been dug up are closed at any given time for ongoing restoration, or because the structures are too fragile for foot traffic. The on-site storage facilities, where thousands of artifacts recovered over 3 centuries are cataloged and held, are not accessible to visitors under any circumstances. They contain objects that have never been publicly displayed, and some that have never been fully studied. Pompeii is, in the truest sense, still being discovered. The parts being discovered right now are the parts you cannot see. Place 15. Camp Darby, near Pisa, Tuscany, 14 kilometers south of Pisa. On a site covering approximately 7,400 acres of Tuscan pine forest between Livorno and Pisa, the United States Army operates what is by some measures the largest American military installation in Europe. Camp Darby is a logistics and munitions storage facility that stores enough American military equipment and ammunition to sustain combat operations for months without a resupply from the United States. The base was established in 1951 during the early Cold War. It is named for Brigadier General William O. Darby, who commanded the American Rangers in Italy during World War II and was killed by artillery fire near Lake Garda on April 30th, 1945, 2 days before Germany surrendered in Italy. He was 34 years old. Today, Camp Darby functions as a critical node in the U.S. Army's European logistics network. It is essentially a vast warehouse complex inside a forest, with hundreds of concrete bunkers containing ammunition, vehicles, and equipment maintained in a state of operational readiness. The facility employs approximately 1,500 American military and civilian personnel, and an additional 500 Italian employees. The surrounding pine forest is a designated nature reserve, partly open to the public on its civilian boundary. The military installation itself is not. The perimeter is fenced, marked, and patrolled. The American flag flies above it on Italian soil under a status of forces agreement that has been in place for more than 7 decades. The tourists on the beach at Tirrenia, which sits within a few kilometers of the base perimeter, mostly have no idea it is there. Place 14. Gorgona Island, off Livorno, 11 miles off the coast of Livorno, visible on a clear day from the Tuscan mainland, sits Gorgona. It is the smallest and most northerly of the Tuscan archipelago islands, covering roughly 225 acres of forest, Mediterranean scrubland, and farmland. It has a Roman lighthouse. It has a medieval Carthusian monastery. It has extraordinary clear water surrounding its coast, and it is a functioning prison. Gorgona has been a penal colony in various forms since 1869 and is currently operated by the Italian prison service as a minimum security agricultural prison, the only island prison still operating in Italy. Inmates, carefully selected for non-violent offenses and approaching the end of their sentences, live and work on the island farming olives, grapes, and vegetables. The Gorgona Winery, operated by inmates under supervision, produces wine sauce that sells in select Italian restaurants at prices that reflect both its rarity and the mystique of its origin. Access is restricted entirely to prison personnel, authorized visitors of inmates, and researchers with specific academic credentials. The Tuscan Archipelago National Park organizes a small number of guided excursions during summer months, strictly limited and subject to approval from the prison administration. In most years, the total number of tourists permitted on the island is counted in the hundreds. Everyone else sees it from the water and wonders what life looks like from the other side of its tree-covered hills. Place 13. The sealed wings of the Royal Palace of Caserta, Naples. The Royal Palace of Caserta, 25 kilometers north of Naples, is the largest palace in the world by volume. Larger than Versailles, larger than the Escorial, larger than Buckingham Palace by a considerable margin. It covers 47,000 square meters, contains 1,200 rooms, 34 staircases, and a park that stretches for 3 kilometers behind it. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. A significant portion of it you will never see. The palace was commissioned by Charles VII of Naples in 1752 and designed by Luigi Vanvitelli, who spent the remaining 21 years of his life working on it. The German surrender in Italy was signed in its throne room on April 29th, 1945. The sections open to visitors, the Grand Staircase, the Royal Apartments, the Court Theatre, and the park, are impressive. The sections not open to visitors are larger. Substantial portions of the upper floors contain rooms that have not been accessible to the public in decades, if ever. Administrative areas, storage for artworks not on display, architectural spaces that have never been fully restored, and original servant and courtier accommodation in varying states of preservation all sit behind doors that do not open on public visiting days. The Italian Ministry of Culture has been engaged in ongoing restoration work for years. The funding required to bring the entire structure to a standard suitable for public access has never materialized at the necessary scale. The result is a building that presents an extraordinary face to the world, while concealing an equally extraordinary interior that most visitors never suspect is there. Place 12. The La Maddalena Submarine Base, Sardinia. On the island of La Maddalena, off the northeastern tip of Sardinia, there is a complex of buildings, tunnels, and waterfront infrastructure that was, until 2008, one of the most sensitive military installations in the Mediterranean. The La Maddalena Naval Base served as the primary home port for United States Navy submarines operating in the Mediterranean for more than 3 decades, and the tunnels and facilities built into the granite of the island to support those submarines remain largely sealed. The U.S. Navy established its presence at La Maddalena in 1972. Santo Stefano Island, directly adjacent, hosted a weapons storage facility whose contents were classified and whose security perimeter was enforced by U.S. Navy personnel with rules of engagement did not invite ambiguity. In 2008, following a submarine accident in the Strait of Messina, the United States withdrew from La Maddalena and the base was handed back to Italy. The tunnels drilled into the granite of Santo Stefano built to store and service submarine-carried weaponry, remain closed. Various proposals for civilian conversion have been discussed over the years. Nothing has been realized. The La Maddalena Archipelago is a national park and genuinely one of the most beautiful stretches of coastline in the Mediterranean. Visitors explore the islands by boat, admiring water that is among the clearest in Europe. What they cannot visit is the infrastructure built beneath the rocks by a foreign military for purposes that were never publicly explained and whose full history remains partially classified. Place 11. The sealed Roman catacombs. Rome has approximately 60 known catacomb systems beneath its streets and surrounding countryside. Networks of tunnels carved into the soft volcanic tufa rock during the 1st through 5th centuries AD, used primarily as burial sites by early Christian and Jewish communities. Of those 60 known systems, 5 are open to the public for guided tours. The remaining 55 are not. The 5 open systems represent a small fraction of the total network. San Callisto alone contains approximately 20 kilometers of tunnels on 4 levels, holding the remains of an estimated 500,000 people. Visitors on guided tours see several hundred meters of a 20-kilometer system, with barriers at the boundaries of accessible sections. The sealed systems range from those documented by archaeologists to those not fully surveyed since their discovery. Some were collapsed deliberately during construction of later buildings. Some are structurally unstable, their tufa walls fractured by groundwater and the weight of the city above. Some contain fresco work that has never been systematically photographed. The Pontifical Commission for Sacred Archaeology, which has jurisdiction over the Christian catacombs, controls access through a permit process that is not open to the general public. Researchers who have seen the restricted sections describe environments of extraordinary density, painted chambers, inscriptions in Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, burial niches carved in patterns that reveal entire community structures. Underneath Rome, the dead outnumber the living by a margin that is difficult to comprehend. Almost all of them are in places you are not permitted to go. Place 10. The Hypogeum of the Colosseum, Rome. The Colosseum receives approximately 7 million visitors per year. Since 2021, access to the arena floor and the Hypogeum, the underground network of tunnels and chambers beneath where the sand of the arena once lay, has been available through a premium ticketed experience. That sounds like access. It is not full access. The Hypogeum visible on the enhanced tour is a carefully managed circuit through a portion of the underground net, lit and stabilized for public safety, with barriers preventing entry into sections beyond the approved. The full Hypogeum is a 2-level network of corridors, chambers, and elevator shafts covering the entire footprint of the arena above, through which animals, gladiators, and mechanical equipment moved. During the 400 years the Colosseum was in active use, much of it has never been consolidated to a standard that permits unrestricted entry. Beneath the Hypogeum itself, excavations in recent decades have uncovered evidence of structures predating the Colosseum, remnants of Nero's Domus Aurea, the vast palace complex, buried when Vespasian built the Colosseum on its grounds. These sub-hypogeal levels are not accessible on any public ticket. They are active archaeological excavation zones requiring permits and professional supervision to enter. Directly beneath one of the most visited buildings on Earth, a Roman city buried beneath a Roman monument waits in the dark, largely undisturbed and largely unseen. Place 9. The Sovereign Military Order of Malta, Aventine Hill. Rome. On the Aventine Hill in Rome, at number 3 Via dei Cavalieri di Malta, there is a gate. Behind the gate, a garden. Behind the garden, a villa. The entire complex is not Italian territory. It is, by a legal arrangement recognized by more than 100 sovereign states, the territory of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, a non-state, sovereign entity with observer status at the United Nations, its own passports, diplomatic missions, and government. The order traces its origins to 1048, when merchants from Amalfi established a hospital in Jerusalem to care for pilgrims. It became a military religious order during the Crusades, governed Rhodes for 2 centuries, and governed Malta for 268 years, before being expelled by Napoleon in 1798. Its Grand Master holds the rank of head of state under international law. The Italian Republic accepts this. The order issues its own stamps and coins. None of this means you can can go inside. The piazza in front of the main gate is publicly accessible, and it contains one of Rome's most famous small pleasures, a keyhole in the gate through which you can see a perfectly framed view of the dome of St. Peter's Basilica at the end of a tunnel of trimmed hedges. Tour guides bring visitors to that keyhole by the thousands. What lies beyond it? The villa, the church of Santa Maria del Priorato, designed by Piranesi, the gardens, and the formal halls of a sovereign state, is accessible by invitation only to a small number of dignitaries each year. The rest of the world stands at the keyhole. Place 8. Monte Serrat Bunker, near Rome, 40 kilometers north of Rome. Rising from the flat Tiber plain between the city and the Apennines, a single isolated limestone ridge stands alone above the surrounding countryside. It is called Monte Serrati. It is 691 meters high, and it is hollow. Inside the mountain, carved from the rock beginning in 1937 on the orders of Benito Mussolini, there is an underground complex of tunnels and chambers extending for approximately 4 kilometers, designed first to shelter the Italian leadership during Allied bombing raids, and later to serve as Italy's nuclear command center during the Cold War. The original excavation was completed by 1943. The war ended before it was seriously needed for its original purpose. What happened next is less well known. Through the 1950s, NATO and the Italian government converted the complex into a signals intelligence and command center intended to function as a continuity of government facility in the event of a nuclear exchange. It was equipped with communications infrastructure, air filtration systems, designed to manage radioactive contamination, water storage, fuel reserves, and living quarters capable of sustaining military and government personnel for extended periods. The bunker was decommissioned in 1995 following the end of the Cold War. Since then, it has been in a state of partial deterioration. Local volunteer associations have advocated for its conversion into a heritage site, and limited organized tours have been conducted on specific dates. In general, the complex is not open. The mountain sits above the Tiber Valley, visible for miles in every direction, keeping its interior to itself. Place 7. The sealed Grand Canal Palaces. The Grand Canal in Venice is 3.8 kilometers long and lined on both sides by approximately 170 buildings, most of them palaces. The Ca' d'Oro, the Ca' Rezzonico, the Palazzo Grassi, the Ca' da Mosto, which dates from the 13th century and is one of the oldest buildings in Venice. Tourists on Vaporetti travel the canal and photograph these palaces from the water. Almost none of those palaces are accessible to the public. A small number have been converted into museums. The Ca' Rezzonico houses the Museum of 18th Century Venice. The Ca' Pesaro contains modern art, but these are the exceptions. The majority of palaces lining the Grand Canal are privately owned, in various states of preservation or deterioration, and entirely off limits to anyone not on the invite list of whoever controls them. Some belong to Italian noble families whose names have appeared in Venetian records for 700 years. Some have been purchased by international billionaires who use them as private residences for perhaps 3 weeks per year. Some are owned by foreign corporations or trusts whose beneficial ownership is not a matter of public record. The interiors of these buildings contain things that no museum in the world can match for concentrated historical density. Original Tiepolo ceiling frescoes, furniture that has stood in the same rooms since the 17th century. Private archives containing correspondence and maps from the period when Venice was the most powerful commercial empire in the Mediterranean. None of it will ever be publicly exhibited. The canal carries you past the facades. What is behind them belongs to a Venice that the city does not show. Place 6. The Vatican Necropolis. Rome directly beneath the floor of St. Peter's Basilica, the largest church in the world. There is a city of the dead. The Vatican Necropolis, known as the Scavi, is a Roman-era cemetery built in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD as a burial ground outside the walls of ancient Rome. It was buried by the Emperor Constantine when he built the first St. Peter's Basilica over it in the 4th century, and it remained sealed and largely forgotten for 1,600 years until Pope Pius XII authorized excavations in 1939. Those excavations revealed an extraordinarily preserved street of mausoleums, some still with their original mosaic floors, painted walls, and funerary sculptures intact. The excavations also produced what the Vatican announced in 1968 was the discovery of the bones of St. Peter himself, found in a niche beneath the high altar in a position consistent with ancient accounts of his burial. The claim remains a matter of scholarly debate. Access to the scavi is among the most tightly controlled of any site in Rome. The Vatican accepts reservations through the Ufficio Scavi and permits groups of no more than 15 people at a time, with each tour lasting approximately 90 minutes. Demand vastly exceeds availability. Reservations must typically be made months in advance. Even visitors who successfully book and complete the tour see only a portion of the necropolis. The remaining sections, partially excavated in the 1940s and then intentionally resealed to prevent further deterioration, lie beneath the basilica floor in darkness. What additional mausoleums, inscriptions, or artifacts they contain is not publicly documented. Directly beneath one of the most visited buildings on Earth, a Roman city of the dead waits, mostly undisturbed, mostly unseen. Place 5. The buried city of Herculaneum, Naples. Every visitor to Herculaneum sees the excavated portion of the site, approximately 5 city blocks of a Roman town frozen by the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD. The wooden doors still on their hinges, the food still in the pots, the beds still in the bedrooms. What no visitor sees is the rest of Herculaneum, because the modern town of Ercolano sits directly on top of it. The eruption buried Herculaneum under approximately 20 meters of volcanic material, far deeper than Pompeii, which is why its organic material survived when Pompeii's did not. Approximately 75% of ancient Herculaneum remains buried beneath the modern streets, apartments, and infrastructure of Ercolano. It is not accessible. It may never be. Unlike Pompeii, where archaeologists can theoretically continue expanding the excavation into open land, Herculaneum presents an almost insurmountable practical problem. The buildings above it are not ruins. They are occupied homes and businesses where people live and work. Excavating further would require purchasing and demolishing substantial sections of a modern Italian town, and then conducting decade-long excavations through 20 meters of hardened volcanic rock. Using ground-penetrating radar and remote sensing tools, researchers have begun mapping what lies beneath Ercolano without excavating it. Identified so far are building structures, open spaces consistent with public buildings, and what may be the ancient Forum of Herculaneum, entirely intact under the modern streets above. It can be mapped. It cannot be touched. Place 4. The restricted summit zones of Mount Etna. Sicily. Mount Etna is the tallest active volcano in Europe, standing at approximately 3,357 meters above the eastern coast of Sicily. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a popular tourist destination. Cable cars run to approximately 2,500 meters on its southern flank. Guided hiking excursions take visitors up to the summit craters during periods when volcanic activity is low enough to permit it. The key phrase in that sentence is during periods when volcanic activity is low enough. The summit zone, specifically the area within 200 to 500 meters of the 4 active summit craters, depending on current conditions, is subject to access restrictions managed by the Etna Park Authority and the Italian Civil Protection Department. Those restrictions are not consistent or permanent. They are calibrated in real time based on volcanic activity, ash emission rates, sulfur dioxide concentrations, seismic tremor levels, and wind direction. When conditions allow it, authorized guides can take small groups to the crater rim. When conditions do not allow it, nobody goes up. What makes Etna genuinely forbidden, rather than merely occasionally closed, is the unpredictability of the volcano itself. Etna erupts in some form every single year, without exception. The 2021 eruption produced lava fountains rising 1,100 meters above the summit craters and ash clouds that closed Catania Airport. There was no warning that exceeded a few hours. The areas around the summit also contain hazards beyond the obvious ones. Toxic gases pool near the vents. Fumaroles shift position without notice. The ground is unstable, with sections of volcanic crust covering cavities. Without a licensed guide and proper monitoring equipment, the upper mountain is inaccessible through both official restriction and the basic logic of self-preservation. Place 3. The Vatican Secret Archives. Vatican City. The Archivum Apostolicum Vaticanum, known internationally as the Vatican Secret Archives, is one of the most famous restricted collections in the world. The word secret in the name is a translation of the Latin secretum, meaning private or personal, referring to the fact that these were the Pope's personal papers rather than documents intended for public circulation. The mistranslation has generated more mystique than the institution would probably prefer. It has also generated a persistent public imagination that what lies within must be extraordinary. Some of what lies within is in fact extraordinary. The archives hold approximately 85 kilometers of shelving, which is how the Vatican measures its holdings, spread across underground bunkers and above-ground repositories. The collection covers 12 centuries of papal correspondence and administration. It includes the original documents of Henry VIII's petition for annulment from Catherine of Aragon, rejected by Pope Clement VII in 1534, which set in motion the English Reformation. It contains the trial records of Galileo's Inquisition proceedings in 1633. It holds the papal bull of 1493 dividing the New World between Spain and Portugal. It contains correspondence with nearly every significant figure in European history who had dealings with Rome over the past 1,000 years. Access is not secret. It is, however, highly restricted. Only accredited scholars with demonstrated research purposes can apply. The application process requires institutional affiliation, a research proposal, and approval by the Vatican's Academic Commission. Approved researchers are permitted to request specific documents from the collection, which archivists retrieve on their behalf. Researchers do not browse the stacks. They do not have unaccompanied access to storage areas. They sit in the reading room and work with what is brought to them. Large sections of the collection have never been fully cataloged. The archive's own index does not provide comprehensive coverage of everything stored. Portions of the collection are known to exist, but are not available for research. The archives covering the pontificate of Pius XII, whose actions during the Holocaust have been the subject of sustained public debate, were opened in 2020 after decades of requests and controversy, and researchers immediately identified materials that had not been previously documented. Whether the archives contain the explosive revelations that popular imagination assigns to them is a question that genuine historians treat with considerable skepticism. The more truthful answer is that the collection is so large and so incompletely indexed that what it contains in its full extent is not entirely known to anyone, possibly including the Vatican itself. The 85 kilometers of shelving are not a repository of kept secrets. They are a repository of accumulated time, most of it bureaucratic, some of it significant, none of it freely open, and almost all of it stored in darkness in a sovereign state that answers to no government on earth. Place 2. The underground bunker network, Rome. Beneath the streets of Rome, there is a parallel Rome that most residents of the surface city have never seen, and that the authorities responsible for it prefer not to discuss in detail. Beyond the catacombs, beyond the scavi beneath St. Peter's, there are military and governmental underground structures from the 20th century that were built in secrecy and have remained in varying degrees of secrecy since. The most significant of these is the network of tunnels and bunkers beneath the Villa Torlonia, the estate in central Rome that served as Mussolini's private residence from 1925 to 1943. 2 bunkers were discovered beneath the villa grounds in 1995. One, a simple air raid shelter from the 1930s, and the second, a far more elaborate structure, 12 meters deep, reinforced against chemical attack and fitted with communications equipment, completed in 1942. A third tunnel system, connecting the villa to other points in the city, has been identified but not fully mapped. The Villa Torlonia is today a public park, and the above-ground buildings contain a museum. A portion of the bunkers was open to limited public visits for a period. That access has been intermittent, and the deeper sections remain sealed, cited as structurally unstable. What the connecting tunnel network contains, where it runs, and whether additional chambers exist along its route are questions that Italian cultural authorities and the city of Rome have not answered fully or publicly. Additional underground facilities from the Cold War period exist beneath other parts of Rome, associated with the post-war Italian government's continuity of government planning under NATO guidance. Their locations and extent are not matters of public record. They are known to exist from references in declassified documents and from occasional constructions accidents in which workers have broken through into previously unknown chambers. The Rome that lies under Rome is incompletely mapped, incompletely known, and almost entirely inaccessible. Place 1. Poveglia Island. Venice Lagoon. There are approximately 118 islands in the Venetian lagoon. Most are accessible by public ferry. Some are residential. Some host monasteries, hospitals, or the private villas of people with sufficient wealth to maintain an island in one of the world's most expensive property markets. Poveglia is none of these things. It sits in the southern lagoon between Venice and the Lido, close enough to see from the ferry route, and it is completely off-limits to the public. The Italian government banned public access in 1968. That ban has not been lifted. Poveglia's history is among the darkest of any piece of land in Italy. The island was inhabited as early as the 5th century, when mainland populations fled there to escape barbarian invasions. In 1379, during the War of Chioggia, the entire civilian population was evacuated, and the island was converted into a military fortification. The population never returned. The island became instead a quarantine station. Beginning in 1793, Venice used Poveglia as a lazaretto, quarantine facility for ships arriving in the lagoon suspected of carrying plague or other contagious disease. Those who died in quarantine were buried on the island. During the bubonic plague epidemics that periodically struck Venice, the dead from the city were brought to Poveglia and burned in mass cremations on the island's central plateau. Estimates of the number of people buried or cremated there over the centuries range from 100,000 to 160,000. The soil of the island is visibly dark with ash and human remains. Dredging operations in the adjacent lagoon have repeatedly brought up bone fragments. In 1922, the island's buildings were converted into a psychiatric hospital, the Ospedale Psichiatrico di Venezia. The hospital operated for 46 years, until 1968, when changing approaches to psychiatric care and the deteriorating condition of the island's infrastructure resulted in its closure. The patients were transferred to the mainland. The staff left. The island was abandoned, and the public ban was put in place. For decades, Poveglia sat in the lagoon, slowly being reclaimed by vegetation, its hospital wards open to the weather, its octagonal Napoleonic fort subsiding into the mud. The Italian government attempted to lease or sell the island on several occasions. In 2014, a lease was offered at public auction, and a Venetian businessman won with a bid intended for hotel development. That project collapsed in subsequent legal and financial disputes, and the island reverted to government control. The buildings are structurally dangerous. The hospital wards have lost portions of their roofs. The floors are compromised by water infiltration and decades of unchecked deterioration. The island has no utilities infrastructure. The government's position on public access remains unchanged. Boat operators in the Venice Lagoon do not, in the normal course of their routes, stop at Poveglia. The ferry lines that serve the lagoon islands do not include it on any schedule. Kayakers and small boat operators who approach the island's shoreline do so in contravention of the access prohibition and risk fines if intercepted. The island sits in plain view of several major ferry routes, close enough to read the architecture of its abandoned buildings on a clear day, and the lagoon traffic passes it continuously without stopping. It is, by some measures, the most forbidden piece of land in Italy, not because of what the government keeps there, not because of what the military operates within it, not because of any ongoing purpose it serves, but because of what happened there across 6 centuries of epidemic, quarantine, death, and institutional isolation, and because the accumulated weight of that history has made the question of what to do with Poveglia one that nobody in Italian public life has yet found a satisfactory answer to. The island waits in the lagoon, the water moves around it, the birds nest in the abandoned wards, and the ban remains in place. Italy keeps its secrets with purpose. From the classified military airspace over Sardinia to the buried Roman city beneath a modern town. From the papal papers locked in 85 kilometers of archive to an island in the Venice Lagoon, nobody has been able to decide what to do with for more than half a century. Every fence in this country has a reason. Every sealed door has something behind it. And the places you cannot visit in Italy are, without exception, more interesting for the fact that you cannot visit them. If this video was worth your time, hit the like button. It helps the channel considerably. And if you want to see what other places exist in this continent that nobody is supposed to reach, subscribe. There is no shortage of locked doors in Europe.